And good morning.
Good morning.
Here we are. I'm
This,
Ani,
I'm Teresa.
and this is now Bridge to a Better World. Thanks for joining us.
I guess if you've been following the news, you know that the Hurricane Helene came ashore this morning and has already trashed some things, notably Cedar Key. There was some drone footage that showed just bits of shattered housing in the road. The place was a mess, and it's still not clear just how much damage its winds produced. It had 140-mile-per-hour winds in places, and the surge, the storm surge, wasn't as bad as they thought because it came ahead of the high tide. So instead of 20-foot tides, they had 10 or 12-foot tides at the most, and that caused quite a bit of damage, of course, but not as bad as the worst that it could have been. And now the thing has moved up. It's heading towards Appalachia, where it's expected to cause considerable landslides, and it's already flooding the area. In other news,
And again, so these sorts of storms, while they've happened throughout time, we can see the frequency and the severity of them increasing. And of course, we all know that the underlying factor here is climate change. And that's going to play into other bits of conversation this morning. So I wanted to just put it out there, climate change.
yeah, good point. And some of it's sporadic like that, and other parts are pretty obvious. Like I was reading recently a point that's probably become obvious to everyone in Portland that there are twice as many days over 90 degrees during the summer as there were prior to 2014. Just in the period since 2014, the last 10 years, this has come about. So there are twice as, this is a tremendous acceleration.
It's
Twice
huge.
as many days over 90 degrees, and has changed the nature of the town. It's changed. I've noticed that it has changed some of the flora and fauna. For example, I don't see as much moss growing as I saw when I first came to this town more than 30 years ago.
Yeah, as somebody who was born in Portland and has lived here pretty much my whole life, there is definitely those changes to be noted. I remember when I was a little kid, because I've always loved the summer. I have always loved the hottest weather, that we can have in Portland. And I would be just elated when we would get over 90 degrees. It would happen every summer, maybe once or twice. And I remember my nearly teetotaling father would go to the store when it hit 90 and he would buy himself, I believe it was Hams. Could have been a Miller.
It could be Miller High Life.
It could
I
be
remember this
Miller.
ritual.
And he would pop open his one can of beer that he would drink, as he said, on the hottest day of the year.
Hottest day, yeah.
And it would usually, it's like, okay, we're over 90. Dad's going to go get his annual can of Miller and, really cut loose. So
I never saw him drunk.
he never got drunk.
Yeah.
One can of Miller was his limit. And frankly, after he retired, I don't think he actually indulged in even that. That was just his working man's libation once a year in the summer. Anyway, what I'm saying here is I have that recall of, wow, it's finally over 90. It's that one, maybe 2 days of the year that's going to get that warm. And I would, as my dad would say, make hay while the sun shined and run around and have a great time playing with sprinklers and other things 8-year-olds did. I'm just saying, noticeable difference, much longer, hotter, dry periods, anecdotally observable for any of us of my age. So carry on. Next.
Well,
sorry for my
speaking
little,
of, well,
trailing down the memory lane. That's what I do.
all of our stories today have to do with global warming in one way or another. There's sort of a microscopic, shall we say, focus right now in Missouri, where the question is, did the couple of H5N1 cases that have popped up in humans arrive from an avian source or from a bovine source, or was it human transmission? They don't know yet. And the CDC is sampling. There's a quote in MedPage today saying not obtaining serology and immune testing at this point would be public health malpractice. But apparently from the article, they're not having an easy time immediately getting those tests. An official was quoted saying that in addition to antibody testing, tests of T cell response should be conducted because not everyone who's infected with influenza virus develops a robust antibody response. And there's been limited transmission of H5N1, according to those writers, to caregivers in the past, but it would be helpful to understand if transmission occurred. And of course, the big deal of whether it was human to human is has it mutated to a form that would attack not just cattle as it has, but actually be able to attack humans efficiently. And my dog is panting heavily as I'm telling you this. Are you trying to tell me something? Yeah. You're worried about H5N1? So the question is still up in the air at this point. And I know that a lot of people will be looking to see what exactly has happened there. 2 people in Missouri, and if it's not human-to-human contact, then it stops there for the moment. But it's in the cattle herds. It has mutated for several mammalian populations around the world, and it is a matter of time before it develops a human-human transmission, and we will simply have to deal with it in whatever form when it appears. And so that's something I'm looking at. But what
it's sort of on the horizon, right? It's not like we have great suggestions. It's just on the horizon. Be aware.
Well, yeah, and we need a functioning government, by which we could say a government that is not a Trump government, obviously, to deal with it. So speaking of the elections,
and when you say that, I just gotta, we need a functioning government to deal with a pandemic. I swear, it's like we've just been here. I swear, I still have vivid memory, not just like my dad drinking that one beer on the hottest day of the year, but what it was like to face life-threatening pandemic under the most corrupt frickin' government we've had in this country. Remember the administration basically blackmailing the different states for PPE equipment, right?
Oh yes.
I guess that's redundant, PPE. So remember, if you did not kiss Trump's ring, your state was not going to get prioritized for PPE or other life-saving measures that needed to happen right about then. This became very clear with standoffs between the administration and, say, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, and several other governors that were like, no, we're not pledging fealty to get the PPE. So again, as we are looking at potentially, heaven forfend, but potentially another pandemic that has the potential of actually being weirder and scarier than the one that we are sort of coasting through. It's important. It's important to think about what government is going to be there to, to be the adults in the room and to try to keep public health funded and active and, I'm going to say, scientifically based. There we go. Scientifically based.
One of the things that dairy farms do to help keep the cows happy is to have some cats around, because cows love cats and vice versa. In these places, in Missouri and around the country, in California, and I'm probably in Oregon, where the infections have gone forward, the cats have died, period. I don't mean some of the cats. They've died. I don't know that any have survived.
Well, that's grim.
That is grim, and that is the nature of H5N1. It generally, once it gets into a population, there seems to be an exception with cows. Once it gets into a population, it tends to absolutely slaughter them. So it's worth looking at. And now, speaking of incoherent policy and global warming, and if you'll pardon me just for saying one more time, as I said so many times in so many ways, it's astonishing, it's humiliating, it's frightening how many Americans will vote or who are fired up about another Trump administration after it becoming so clear that he is a demagogue and a racist and a monster, and it says terrible things about my terrible America, about
my terrible
about my
America.
terrible Americans. And there's a third of the population, or some maybe smaller fraction, that has clearly just become absolutely monstrous. And I make no apology for saying that it's too late. All you guys voting for Trump, fuck you, you're monsters. And now for some in-depth. No, I'm sorry, but I just need to say it. What the hell is wrong with you?
Well, yeah, okay, yeah, pass. That actually needs to be said.
Anyway, so there are migrants heading north to the border for various reasons, and most of them, if you track it back, have to do with either U.S. aggression and the destruction of social bonds in the South. In South and Central America, and or global warming, loss of crops, and associated effects such as zoonotic diseases, and the changing of insect populations and sort of thing
and famine. Let's just
has made it difficult.
Famine, landslides.
People are coming here because it's impossible to live where they're at, and we see two basic ways of dealing with the immigrant crisis, and it is a crisis. One is to really just pretty much ignore it and say, look the other way if anything is said at all, and that would be the Biden-Harris administration. And I'm not going to cut them a break on this. And the other is the Trump way of doing things, which is to demonize them and to say that they're bringing in drugs and that they are, monsters of various kinds and that they eat pets, etc. So we'll dismiss
the
that.
Racist demagoguery falling from that man's mouth, he's never been short on it, right? I mean, This is generally his comfort zone. It's, aside from his braggadocio sort of, I am very, very rich, and therefore y'all will bow down to me. Besides that, he is you can count on it, to fall to racism really, really quickly. He did it as a business dude in New York before he entered politics, with his racist full-page adverts calling for the execution of the Central Park Five, which were those men were eventually exonerated and found not guilty of the crimes they had been forced to confess. And then, of course, we can also see that was the 14-year-old dog taking priority in going outside. We know what happens when we don't listen.
There's some cleaning to be done otherwise.
Anyway, there's the Central Park Five. There's also, right out of my head with the dog stuff. We get the idea. We all know Trump is a racist piece of shit.
And that's working pretty well for him. So the question is, what will...
the birtherism, of course.
Yes.
That was the other thing I was going to mention, produce the birth certificate.
And his smug little statements about what great genes he has. He's a disgusting racist. So we all know this.
Yeah.
So I want to do a brief summary of the border crisis. And I've used Vox, Axios, and even Wikipedia for this. And this will be a relatively short section. Under the Trump administration, most migrants arriving at the southern border were from Central America's Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. In the last few years, however, the number of migrants coming from those countries has been eclipsed by those coming from South America, particularly Venezuela, Colombia, and Nicaragua, and the Caribbean, including Haiti and Cuba. And in the case of Venezuela and Cuba, this is, of course, being driven by a literal embargo and blockade of warships blockading ships coming into the port, that sort of thing, theft of billions of dollars in gold from the Venezuelan government, etc. They've been driven out by recent compounding political and economic crises, Wikipedia writes, and natural disasters in their home countries, which is a much nicer way of saying it and doesn't point the finger to Uncle Sam. Migrants are increasingly coming from more far-flung areas of the world, including increasingly China, and rising immigration from India and Europe, and smugglers at the southern border have started marketing their services to these populations in those countries and in those languages in a bid to expand their business. So this is hot business. People are saying, come on down, I'll get you in for X amount of money. And it's a steep amount of money.
Very.
And they're coyotes in every sense of the word. So it's a pretty grim situation. Anyone coming here is pretty desperate. And to the point that actually 10,000 people, according to one group that tracks this sort of thing, at least 10,000 people have died in the last 30 years trying to cross the U.S. border, makes it one of the most dangerous border crossings in the world. I mean, you hear about people trying to cross the Mediterranean and dying there, but people also die by the thousands here, and 600 have died in the last year, I believe, from heat exhaustion, principally exposure, they say.
Yeah, and also remember that there are communities on the north side of the southern border that want to do humanitarian aid, that want to make sure migrants don't die in the desert, that leave jugs of water, and that was being criminalized.
That was being criminalized, and there are groups that actually go out and slash those bottles of water, trying to make people die, successfully actually engaging in homicide. And those people are not only not being strung up, they are encouraged by certain sheriffs in the region. So,
and I just sort of want to weave my way back into, again, the causes of the migration. Not only is America one of the richest countries in the world by many metrics, but we have actively caused the pain and suffering that is driving migration right now around the world. So not only are we obligated under UN Charter to accept political asylum seekers, right? Everyone has a right to apply for political asylum, but in fact, we have actively contributed to the causes of immigration. We have actively contributed to corrupt strongmen being put into positions of power around the world that are friendly to US interests. We are directly responsible for the extremely failed drug war in Central America. And we know the horrors of the civil wars that were, again, backed by, funded by, and armed by the U.S. throughout the 80s, and that those wars have repercussions that we are still seeing. We know that many of the problems with the cartels, with the violent gangs that we hear about in Central and in South America, really got their footing from some of the far right despots that we put into place, that we supported.
Going back to Ronald Reagan, who called them the moral equivalent of the founding fathers, which is truer in some ways than he intended.
Right. And so there's all of that. There's also the fact that we as a nation contribute far, far, far more than our fair share of greenhouse gases, of climate change fuel, basically, that we are doing far more than our part in bringing about the horrific storms, droughts, floods, and landslides that, again, are causing famine and are causing the loss of entire villages as the sides of hills collapse and crush the houses and surrounding lands. And so what do we do then, right? As the Statue of Liberty says, bring me your hungry, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, right? Not only is it our obligation as a land founded on genocide and slavery, but here we are, by and large, an immigrant population that has taken over this land, now saying, yeah, but we're shutting the door behind us because we got ours and everyone else can what? The hypocrisy, the inhumanity, the racism, and the ahistoricism just make me want to go out and possibly scream in the streets.
That said, now there are, of course, very practical reasons to address the border crisis directly. And if I can quote Alex Thompson and Steph Knight in Axios, the rolling chaos along the border has grown to the point that Biden now is embracing immigration policies he ran against in 2020, such as restricting asylum laws and suggesting he'll shut down the border as the crisis threatens his reelection. And of course, you may recall that there was an attempt to create a fairly harsh bill along those lines, which would have also included yet more funding for Israel's attack on Gaza, and also had funding for Ukraine, which was shut down on orders from Trump because he was afraid, and he was right about this, that any direct action on the border would give the American people the idea that the Biden administration had some idea of what to do, and that is actually what is most needed. And I said I would keep this short, so I'm already going to summarize. There's been a lot of infighting in Biden's team, and they seem to just really hope that the problem will go away. But of course, it won't. And right now, Kamala Harris is heading for the border without a clear policy, and I think I can predict that it is likely to be disastrous unless she does an excellent and different job in the way she handles it. I think I pointed out any of us could become refugees, and when we do, no one will care why. So there's a moral reason for accepting refugees into the country. But the border crisis is frightening to Americans principally because its meaning is a void. U.S. citizens don't know what is likely to happen. As the various crises, many related to global warming, drive probable millions to the very relative safety of the USA. On the right, the crisis is red meat, and an easy political solution, that is, the thing to do, is to demonize the immigrants as drug lords and disease bearers and eaters of pets. Any stupid thing, it doesn't matter. Everyone's ready to get on the terror bandwagon and to hate them and to drive them away, and that works great for Trump.
Well, I mean, we're also going to mention that Trump, at this point, has put forth the idea of camps, serial numbers, and massive camps with serial numbers and deportations. And I just got to say, wow, that sounds kind of fucking familiar.
Yep.
I did not see that coming, right?
Mm-hmm. Not see that going. I guess I see what you did there. For the left, the first thing that should be done, that is not being done, is that Biden and Harris should identify these racist distortions like the drug smear and the pets, reassure Americans that they have or are credibly working toward a solution that has a definite form. The problem is, don't know what the problem is, don't know what it's going to be like. What are these people going to do? A void is always frightening. And racism is there. The racism is going to fill that void and is filling the void right now. And so what's the question? It's just a big black nothing. And if the Harris administration, or if the Harris candidacy, I mean to say, will come out and say, well, I plan to do this, I plan to do that. Here are some definite forms it will take. And I would like to see, of course, a definite way forward for migrants to become American citizens. And then she needs to come out and say, this is a good thing. This is a crisis that is happening that we have the power to deal with. Take a deep breath and understand that we have the strength and we have the moral force to make this a good thing for Americans. It's that easy. So you already feel better with me saying that. That's all she needs to do. But what she's going to do, I fear, is come out there and say, oh, well, I was a tough prosecutor and I'm going to arrest these drug traffickers. Now, the thing is, the drug traffickers are white guys, by and large. And it's not a race problem. It's not a Mexico problem. It's a U.S. and Mexico and Central America and drug users in the U.S. problem, of course. And it's much more complex than we've never been able to arrest our way out of it. It couldn't possibly work. So, I mean, I think everyone will see through that. But as far as I know, that's what she plans to do, is to go to the border and say that she's tough. And she cannot out-tough Trump on this, because Trump, as you were saying, is going full Nazi on it. And that is satisfying to that third of the Americans that constantly supports him and you know what I think about you guys. So
Would that be the fuck right off?
yes,
A third
yeah,
of the
no,
yeah.
there's no need. I don't care what she says in terms of what you guys who support Trump think about it. There's nothing logically that you will react to, nothing in terms of compassion that you will react to. You have rotted your brains. Go soak your heads. So Harris, instead of trying to out Trump,
Teresa's
Harris,
words of wisdom to any Trump supporter: go soak your head.
yes. She should be reassuring the majority of Americans that she has a way forward. And I think that's all people really want. People take a deep breath and say, oh, well, it's going to be a crisis, but we have the power, the capacity, and some idea of what to do. And then it won't be so terrifying.
Well, and I gotta, it's weird that it's come here, right? Because there are many crises that this country is facing. And immigration, I'm just saying, is not one of them. And yet, because of the effective demagoguery and the constant immigrants going to get your mama and your cat and your canary too, that people, even in the more centered political persuasion, in states that do not border any other country, are stating that immigration is one of their biggest fears, one of their biggest concerns. And why? It's not a real concern, right? It's real only because we have been subjected now to about 8 years of constant lies and terror mongering from the racist Trump machine.
And I think just to sum it up, I mean, this is just another thing in which we need to be able to say to the Harris candidacy, okay, you need to handle this, and you need to handle it by going left, because we're not going to let you go right. That's been tried and failed. You can't compete in terms of being right wing or being, racistly harsh, like Trump. That won't work. So come up with the good stuff. Pay attention to the good guys, and you'll win.
And I just want to point out, Wild Radio noted the source, Harvest of Empire by Juan Gonzalez, an excellent, excellent source.
Okay.
There are so many. We know this stuff, right? We have been aware and talking about this stuff for 30 or 40 years. And to see it being so well exploited by the hate mongers and the racists who would like to come back into power to, to be the dictator. The fact that this issue is once again being exploited is horrific. It continues to be exploited, and we have to actually counter the narrative. We actually have to talk about the fact that that Statue of Liberty means something, that is a part of our culture, that immigration is in fact a national obligation to help international immigration, because in fact, as we've both stated, as we all know, the U.S. has brought about the conditions that are causing the misery that really force people to flee their homes, their communities, their families, and everything they've known. This is not a choice most people make lightly. In fact, I'm going to say it's not a choice anyone makes lightly. By the time you are at the border, you have risked life and limb to try to avoid certain death, right? You have paid a whole lot of money, and you have known, more than likely you have seen companions die on the trail in getting this far. It's a horrendous situation. We must aid these people. We have to stop demonizing these people. That's what I have to say. So anything else?
That's all I have to say.
Okay, so I'm going to point out you are watching This Is Now Bridge to a Better World. Oh, we so hope we can build that bridge to a better world. Let's do that, shall we? It takes all of us working together. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already, and go ahead and hit the like button as well. Do hit that notification bell too, because you never know. It has happened that we have come on at various times because there's just something breaking and we need to talk about it. One of those things, two of those things that are sort of looming large, and we may come in sometime before next Friday, would be the genocide and widening crisis with Israel now involving Lebanon and also the border of Syria in its militarized attacks. The death toll in Lebanon this week is at 700 since Monday. That is a sovereign nation, near as I can figure. It's right there on the globe and everything. I think it's, been recognized for a long time, right? Lebanon, it's a country. And Israel seems to be invading it without repercussions. Now, we've certainly threatened repercussions, but where are they? So there's that over 40,000, well over 40,000 Palestinians dead since the start of this horrific genocide a year ago. Also, we are looking at Putin threatening nuclear use of nuclear weapons, and that ain't nothing. Putin threatening to use nuclear weapons if any nuclear power, I think that's the US, continues to help the Ukraine. Okay, that's a bit terrifying. I'm keeping my eyes on that. Just heard about that this morning, last night. It is starting to sink into the consciousness how fucking terrifying that is. So please let us all hold together. I love this community that we create together on Fridays. Thank you so much for joining us. Please, again, do hit that notification bell so you'll know when we take to the streaming again. Also, subscribe if you haven't already and hit the thumbs up like button.
What's your intuition say this week?
Right. So I did this tarot reading, right? And what we have in the kitty cards, we have the King of Cups, we have the Three of Pentacles inversed, and we have the Nine of Cups. What does it all mean? Things really for us all are going pretty well if we continue to really express our desires, and we plumb the depths of our emotional maturity. The King of Cups really talks about being stable, being methodical, having self-discipline and control, as well as the ability to create intimacy through the wise heart, through positive, heartfelt connections, right? I see this as somebody who is a leader in community, or as community takes as community takes the reins and leads itself into this wise heart, open, understanding, willing to look at what is going on beneath the surface. It's what these dolphins are doing up here. They, of course, jump and then dive down well deep into the oceans. And so they're symbolizing our need to look at what's under the surface and to look at the world of the subconscious. That little anchor over here, uh, really points to the loyalty and the steadfastness of this card. Right, this symbolizes deep, heartfelt connection, and the ability to pull people together to nurture and to guide with that deep heart truth. All right, so we have the Three of Pentacles, and it is on its head. What does that mean? Well, the Three of Pentacles is really all about putting labor in, to our goals, our desires. It's usually seen as the card of the apprentice, so that you are taking on new roles and learning them at a craftsperson's level. On its head, it means we might need to pull back from our specialties, from our day to day realms that we know over and through and again. And we need to pull back and make sure we're not missing the forest for the trees. We've applied ourselves well, we know our shit, but let's pull back and get a bigger perspective. It cautions us against sort of a tunnel vision of thinking that the way that we know that works for us is going to work for everyone, because that ain't true, right? We all have different strengths, different gifts. And so it's making sure that we realize that we know great ways of doing things. We have worked hard on building our skills, but we also have to pull back and realize there may be other ways to do things that could work as well. And then finally, we have the Nine of Cups. The Nine of Cups is often called the wish fulfillment card. It really does give us the promise of really good things to come. Again, the good things would be in the realm of heart connections, of building community, of building friendships, of taking heart in each other's joy and capacity to be happy, to be whole, and to be together. And so think about what we really want to achieve, and let's put our energy that direction. It's time to practice solidarity like our lives depend on it, because they do. And that is what the cards say today. It's all about the heart connection. It's all about increasing our understanding of our connections to each other at that deep emotional level. It's about knowing our own emotional truths because it's really hard. It's like it's hard to maintain an open heart in this environment that can be so harsh, where there's so much pain, where there's so much suffering, and where there are so many assholes trying to exploit and increase that. But here we are. And really, the only way through it is with each other, and with each other with full hearts and full voices into this beautiful dance towards liberation. So,
Right on.
that is what I have. Thank you all so very much for joining us this morning,
Thanks
even
for the
Elliot.
comments.
And it's always nice to know we finally got a troll.
Yeah.
Have a good time under the bridge, troll. And with that, we love you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.
Cheerio.
And a fine good morning to you.